Okay, well, welcome back. In this next segment here, we're going to talk about D.W. Griffith and his film, The Birth of a Nation. Now, I might have said in the part one of this lecture that this was in 1912, but this movie actually was made in 1915. And for all purposes necessary, D.W. Griffith is really known as the man who invented Hollywood. With this film, Birth of a Nation, he gives Hollywood the feature film formula. Now, it's not something that you can necessarily plug in and say, oh, every movie will look exactly like this one, but the idea of having two or three storylines that are intertwined, working through a story arc with beginning action and then kind of a middle apex as well as a dramatic climax at the end. That sort of formula is established in this movie that you're going to watch some segments from. And also, you're going to see a lot of very interesting aesthetic differences from some of the early films that we watched last week. You'll see things like close-ups. Hey, there's a novel idea. We don't have to just stay so wide like we're watching a play. We could actually come in and see what the people are feeling. Now, to us, that seems foreign. Come on. A close-up, that makes sense. In fact, I bet you, a lot of you watch movies and don't even realize there's a wide shot, and then a medium shot, and then a close-up, and then a shot of some action, and then back to a wide shot. We are just programmed. We're used to seeing it. We grew up with it. But mind you, when cinema began, there was nobody that told them this is how you should make a movie. They're developing it. They're discovering it. And they really are creating, as I used last week the term, a film language. A language that we all grew up with and we understand. When the camera gets a little bit closer, we know we are becoming closer to it. I mean, it's just like we actually are getting closer to the subject. And by putting the camera a little bit more into the film, we become more emotionally connected to it. Now, don't watch for modern editing in this. You're not going to see a lot of close-ups, but you will see some close-ups. You'll also see some interesting cutaways to corn in a field. You'll see someone actually reading a letter and actually see the close-up of the words that are on the letter. You'll see close-up of faces. You'll also see one where they're holding a bird out in the field, and it's interesting how those things are intercut. There also is subjective intercutting going on here, where we actually cut away to see what somebody is remembering in their head. You might not actually see this clip, but there is a moment in the movie where this movie is about the Civil War, and a girl's brother dies, and she's reading a letter from him. He's already dead, but she's reading a letter from him, looking at a picture of him, and we cut away to a moment when they were together. That's subjective. That's not real time. That such as some of the old films from the Lumiere brothers or Edison's early films, where we're just watching real time. No, this is getting into somebody's mind. So it's interesting how that develops. We'll see some cross-cutting going back and forth between multiple stories. We'll see some very authentic-looking sets. Griffiths desired to make this movie look and feel as if you were actually during the era of the Civil War. There is no widescreen. There's no color. In fact, there's no sound. But what we lack is made up for in a huge amount of creativity, and a lot of it is based on Griffith's desire to have realism, or the representation of reality, which suggests a symbolic universal meaning. And so the idea here is that we're not really seeing the Civil War, but this symbolic realism is that we can feel as if we are watching the Civil War. For all of the advances that this movie has in filmmaking, it has equally the same amount of controversy. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, in a moment when you watch some of these movies, and you can actually watch some clips from other places, the movie's called The Birth of the Nation. It's based on a book called The Klansman, and it really focuses on the period after the Civil War, known as the Reconstruction, where the Ku Klux Klan rises. And the bent of the movie is not that the Klan were terrorists to African Americans and murderers, but that they actually were the saviors of the Southern culture, particularly white Southerners, and that they came to defense of Southerners as, the blacks, the former slaves ran amok and were trying to ruin the Southern country. It's a skewed point of view. It's not based on any reality. Unfortunately, Griffith has a bent because of his Southern ancestors. His grandfather fought in the Civil War, and he defended himself by saying, well, at the dinner table when I was a kid, I grew up hearing these stories about how the Klan saved the lives of many of my family and many of their friends, and was intrigued with that idea. So there is a problem with this movie. As we watch it, there are going to be scenes that don't jive with us well. They don't sit well because we are nearly 100 years away from it, where a little bit of history, a little bit of time, a little bit of reconciliation, and we realize that this is not necessarily based on any historic fact. In fact, there have been times for people to call for a ban of it. There have been times that people in Hollywood have wanted to change the Griffith Observatory, if anybody's ever been to it, in Griffith Park, both of which are named after D.W. Griffith. There have been times that people wanted to take his name off and change it. But his name still survives because he was such a revolutionary filmmaker. And I think it's for us to discuss and to debate the controversy here, and see how is it that such an amazing film on an artistic level could have such a horrible conclusion in regards to who the Klan really was. And it does bring us to an interesting discussion. Is cinema manipulative? Go on, you can answer. I think all of us would agree that there's something about a movie that moves us emotionally, that touches us. And when we watch movies like this with, as we would say, the wrong message, we can get offended and upset about it. But how many other times do we watch movies with maybe a little bit more of a subtle message, but nonetheless it's a point of view that we don't agree with, or we didn't grow up with, or it doesn't reflect our upbringing, and yet we start to go, I never thought about it like that. That's interesting. And we maybe give a little bit of our minds over to being manipulated. It happens all the time. Whether it's just a simple comedy with a character who's a little bit more flamboyant than we're used to, or a very overt message like a movie like, let's just say, Fahrenheit 9/11. Did the filmmaker, Michael Moore, have a point of view? Probably. Did he have an agenda? Most definitely. And did he make his movie in a powerful way? Yeah. When you watch it, there are times when you're moved emotionally, but it's very one-sided. And he's presenting his subjective point of view. So I bring that up for us to discuss. It's rich. It's very rich. And this is the part that I'm frustrated that we don't have a class to actually discuss these things. I will put something up on the discussion board and like us to discuss it. But the reality is, film is manipulative. And we need to realize that and enjoy it for what it is, but also not go into it blindly with a mind that is not aware. So what I'd like you to do is take a look at some of these clips from D.W. Griffith and come back to part 3 of my lecture. All right, take care.